our one Facebook page and YouTube. We are currently experiencing some technical difficulties, so we are only streaming to 2 pages right now. We're streaming to my current Facebook page, which magically connected, and then we're streaming to our YouTube platform. So hopefully we'll get more people to join as we carry on. You've got to love technology, right? You've got to appreciate all the technology. But so happy to have everyone here today. So happy that you're able to join us, even if you're not able to join us live because we're not streaming to our normal platforms. But for those of you who are going to be watching this later and trying to connect later and stream later, I am so excited because today I have a very special guest. Her name is Barb Ginger, and she has been a nurse in pretty much every capacity that you can think of being a nurse. We do have, yay, thank you for tuning in from Nigeria. But Barb is fantastic. She is, I believe, retired out of her nursing career, but she has dedicated her life to so many people and helping so many people. And she's here today to talk about what it's like actually being a nurse and working as a nurse here in the United States. She's going to talk about the current climate of nursing. We're going to talk about maybe why we have a nurse shortage in the first place. Why is it so difficult to have nurses and find nurses in the first place? So very excited. Have your questions ready for Barb. Pop them in the chat as she and I are chatting. And hello in Pakistan. We're so happy to have you here today. But pop your questions in the chat for Barb because she is the pro. Like I said, I'm only to really able to answer the English questions, some immigration questions, but Barb is here to answer all of your nursing questions. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome Barb to the show.
Thank you.
Hey, Barb.
Hey.
Where are you joining from?
I am joining from Amelia Island in Florida, where it is awfully hot. Anyway, but I am glad to be here.
Fantastic. So Barb, tell us a little bit. I know earlier I said we could take 20 minutes of the show with you just listing your resume and where you have worked. But tell us, give us a brief version of your resume and all of the capacities that you've worked as a nurse.
Okay, so I graduated from nursing school in, believe it or not, 1969. And I've worked up north in a big healthcare system, Geisinger healthcare system. And I worked my way through and grew up there and became the senior nurse executive. I worked in cardiac unit. I worked in the emergency room. I worked in the operating room. I worked in recovery room. I worked in almost every med surge, which every nurse should start in. And I wound up as a life flight nurse. Yes. And so then I decided it was time to get out of the snow and cold. And I came to Florida and to a little 60-bed hospital, which is wonderful. And so here I am today. And I stayed there 15 years and then I retired.
What is what made you, for those who don't know, we use a lot of words over here in our American language and English jargon. What is a life flight nurse? What does that mean?
Okay, so sometimes patients or clients or people have a very bad car accident or some kind of an accident where an ambulance is not going to get them to a trauma center fast enough. So many places in many states have helicopters to transport. And in those helicopters, they have to have EMTs. Those are the people that come and pick you up in the ambulance, but now they're in a helicopter. Nurses, sometimes physicians. And so that's why we say we care for people with illness and trauma. And so we have a big trauma center here. And where I came from, we had a huge trauma center. So we picked up children for our children's hospital and adults for the adult hospital and transported them and many times it's a heart condition or it's a stroke. And the number of minutes it takes is important. But you have to have a nurse there also.
Wow. So when you say up north, were you just in one state or?
I was in Pennsylvania, in
Okay.
Philadelphia, and in central Pennsylvania, where Geisinger healthcare system is it's like a Mayo Clinic setup.
Mhm.
And we had 10 hospitals. And that's where I decided traveling every day to every hospital was a little much, but actually I had the most fun, and the best part of my career was as a staff nurse. I loved it.
So what's a staff nurse? If you're a staff nurse, what does your day look like as a staff nurse?
Okay, a staff nurse, for instance, when you come out of nursing school, probably the first place they're going to place you in a healthcare system is on a medical surgical unit, where you have patients that come in with the flu, or they have pneumonia, or something that can be handled by regular nursing. And usually, I want to say this is a tough part of nursing. Uh, there's always a shortage.
Mhm.
And when you talk about shortages, there's been a shortage since I've been a nurse. This is not a new thing. And so many nurses get their experience on a med surg unit, and then they decide they want to go to a more intense unit. So they go to the ER, they go to ICU, or they go to the operating room, and until they find where they want to be for the rest of their career.
Okay. So talking about, we have viewers from England, we have viewers from Ghana. Hello, everybody. Super happy you're here today. When I ask about the nursing climate, I'm asking about, how do nurses feel here in the United States? What do you think is still the draw for people to be nurses here in the United States? What is the best thing about being a U.S. nurse right now?
Okay, the best thing, for instance, you have to have a heart for nursing, and you have to be able to understand the human condition. And you have to be able, I mean, for instance, I could never be a pediatric nurse because it's a very hard specialty. But a lot of nurses like children, and that's their niche. But you get attracted mostly when you're in high school. Sometimes you work in a hospital as a candy striper, or you have a relative that's a nurse, and you see how dedicated they are, and you have a draw. Now, in my case, I decided when I was a junior in high school, I waited till the last minute, but I would never have gone into another career. I loved it. And I'll just be honest with you, it's not the pay. The pay is not attractive unless you get to the point where you can be a travel nurse, or you could be highly specialized, or unless they're attracting you with bonuses or higher salaries because they cannot get nurses.
Mhm.
But I'll be really honest with you. It's a hard job. It really is. It's hard. It's heartrending. And sometimes you come home and you're happy, and sometimes you come home and you think, oh my gosh, and you think about a certain patient, but you have to have the heart for it.
Oh, absolutely. 100% agree. There are a few careers in life that I feel like you have to have a heart for it, or you're
Yeah.
never going to be fulfilled. Why do you think, hello in South Korea? We have someone saying, thank you for sharing your experience. What do you think is the primary reason we have a nurse shortage right now? Why are people not wanting to get into nursing right now, in your
Okay.
opinion?
For many of the reasons I just cited, and it's hard work, but I will tell you, we've always had a nursing shortage because it's very competitive. For instance, here where I live, we have several healthcare systems, and they're in competition for nurses. And the system can only put out so many nurses. Plus the fact we require a bachelor's now. You cannot just get a regular registered nurse. You have to have a BSN to work in a hospital. And that's the importance of continuing with your education. Because you'll be in high demand. So you always want to continue education. but there's a nursing shortage because it is difficult. And a lot of nurses will say, I really don't need this. I think I'm going to go into administration, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that. But to work as a staff nurse in the unit where we have hands-on patient care is difficult. It is very difficult because you have people, and we all get sick. We all get the flu. We all get, whatever, COVID, and you call in sick, and there's no one to call to come in. So you might have to work a double shift. You might have to work 16 hours, 12 hours. Sometimes they'll say, can you do some overtime? And it's exhausting because on a regular med-surg unit, generally the nurse to patient ratio, in other words, the patients you have to care for in your assignment, you might have 10 patients or 8 patients. And it's difficult, but it's very rewarding. Don't get me wrong. I would never have changed my career ever.
What tell me a little bit, what kind of degrees do you have? I'm always so impressed because you talk about you have to have a bachelor's of nursing, a BSN degree, in order to even practice in a hospital, to be recognized as a nurse in a hospital. So for all you nurse aides out there, go for that BSN. Come on over as an RN. The immigration process is way quicker, and the pay will be much better. So if you're a nurse aide, go for that BSN. But you have multiple degrees. You do not just have a BSN. Tell us about your educational background.
Okay, well, I have a registered nurse. I have which was a 3-year program, which is the one they've done away with. I have a BSN. I have a master's in communication and education, and I have a PhD in medical ethics and a doctorate in nursing practice.
So with a doctorate in nursing practice, is that just specific to any type of nursing, or?
No, let me tell you about Doctor of Nursing Practice is a fantastic step for everybody, because then you get to be almost independent. You can, like many of our doctors here, have nurse practitioners, and when they're the ones that do the well checkups. Like when you go to your doctor for your annual checkup or whatever, a lot of times you don't see the doctor, but you see a nurse practitioner. And believe me, doctors don't like to hear this, but they are just as good if you don't have anything really wrong. And if you do, they call the doctor in or send you to a specialist or whatever. But the pay is pretty good for a nurse practitioner. It is pretty good. And that's one of the reasons there's very few nurses that stay in the hospital setting on a med-surg unit. I had a few, and they were fantastic nurses. They just did not want to go any further. And that was good for us. But I encourage nurses, and I've always encouraged nurses, to go beyond and keep going to school, keep learning, even if you get certifications.
Absolutely. I had a question. You keep saying things, and I'll think of questions as you say them. Talking about med-surg, and you and I asked you this question before we went on air. Have you worked with international nurses, and what would you say was their biggest struggle? Like from your perspective, working with someone who was not from the United States. I know you specifically mentioned working with the Philippines, the Orient, Asian areas. What was their biggest struggle as they began work in the United States?
Well, the interesting thing about nurses that come, a lot of times they already have their education. Like we had a few nurses that were trained as doctors in their own country, but they couldn't practice as physicians here because the education, the re-education is really intense, and they had families and they didn't want to do that. But I probably would say the biggest hurdle would be communication, and maybe not the English language, because they came over with a very good handle on English. It was just like the meaning of words, and maybe when they were taking the orders from the doctors, it wasn't the same as when they were in their own country. But I'll tell you what, at least here, most of them stayed, most of them became citizens, And most of them became very productive members of our community here.
That is awesome. What tips would you give? So I talk about when nurses come over to try and find like a buddy, someone to help them understand the jargon and all that kind of stuff. What tips would you give nurses who are they've accepted a job, they're just kind of in a holding process in their country? What can they do to kind of prepare themselves for that medical jargon that we use in the United States? What tools do we have that we could help them with?
Well, the internet when it works, of course. The internet is a great thing, and most countries have internet. In fact, a lot of people that come from different countries have a better handle on the internet than we do.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you go to Google and you look and you put in a specific question about a hospital, or maybe the best thing to do would be a medical dictionary.
Mm-hmm.
And I would recommend Tabers, Tabers, and they're online. It's an online book right now. And
Mm-hmm.
you can go there and go through all of that, and it'll tell you a lot. And it's written I have to say, it's written mostly for the United States.
Okay. It's called Tabers.
Yes.
Okay. So you'd just be able to look that book up online?
It's a medical dictionary.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I'm writing it down. I hope all of our viewers are writing that down too, because I'm over here writing it down.
When I was in nursing school, that was we didn't have the internet, but that was one of the textbooks. That and the Merck manual.
Okay.
Which is another good Merck, MERCK, like the pharmaceutical.
Okay. Merck manual.
Yes.
Perfect.
Now, the other thing is, many hospitals, when they know that they're going to be this is the step you take when you know that you're going to be going to the United States to work. They will assign a preceptor or a person you could communicate with. So that's where you really want to get into in-depth questions about the work environment, and maybe where should I live? Is housing? Can somebody help me? And let me tell you something. The nurses because they know they're going to get help, they're more than willing to help you with getting a place, place to rent or whatever it is, or schools for your children. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. We talked about that last week, is assigning a preceptor. And I know it's hard to say because every hospital's different. Every location's different of what's going to be provided to our nurses. But I encourage everyone to find a buddy and ask those questions. It's in the United States, it's totally common to be like, oh, where do you send your kids to school? Yep. Right. I mean, that's how you learn. That's how you figure out, oh, this is a good school. This isn't a good school.
Well, the other thing too is, once you get here and you get into because you don't have a lot of time to worry about what the philosophy of each healthcare system is, but every healthcare system has a different philosophy of nursing. And it took me a while to find Baptist. Not that everybody else is bad, but they matched how I did my care. Caring was a big thing. We had a nurse theorist who used to come and visit us, and you want a place that matches how you work.
Do you think that's an acceptable question to ask in an interview? Because we have many nurses who are going through the interview process, right? Is that an acceptable question to ask? Like, what is your nursing philosophy?
Yes, absolutely. What is your nursing philosophy? How do you deliver care? There's things like patient-centered care, there's team nursing, there's a whole bunch of different ways that you can administer care, but you want to make sure it gels with how you practice. And it may not be until you get here and you work in a healthcare system and you think, oh man, this is great, I picked the right place. Or, you know what, I think I'm going to give it a couple of years and I'm going to look around a little bit. Because
yeah, I was gonna say, what advice? So many of our nurses sign a 3-year contract with the company who essentially brings them over here, right?
Mhm.
What advice do you have for nurses who, even let's say in that first year, they figure out may not be the place for me? What advice do you have for those nurses who kind of have to stick it out for another 2 years, even though it may go against their philosophy of nursing and their personal choice of nursing? What advice do you have for those people who might be in those sticky situations?
I would say by the time you're there for 6 months to a year, you should have gotten to know other nurses that have been there for a while, that grew up in the system. And you might want to pick one that you're close to and sit down and say, you know what, I'm having this issue and I'm having a struggle with this. And can you help me? How can I better gel into this? And you don't want to say this, but until my contract's up. But there are ways around contracts too, but it's a sticky situation. You really have to get advice. I wouldn't just say, oh, I quit, because the medical community, I don't care how big the city is or how small the town is, the medical community is a small one. Everybody knows everybody. I knew nurses from Orange Park. And that's where I live. I'm sorry, but you want to make sure that you don't leave with a bad feeling. You don't leave your employer with a bad feeling, because the word travels. That's
In the United States, we have this phrase, anytime you're thinking about leaving, we say, don't burn any bridges.
exactly, yes.
And what that phrase means is you want to make sure, if you're thinking about leaving, that you leave on good terms, that you have fulfilled your obligations, that you've been professional. It's always, treat others the way you want to be treated, right? Even if you feel like you're not being treated professionally, you always do your best to be professional. That way you give the other side nothing negative to say about you, because like Barb said, the nursing community is a tight-knit community and word travels, and your reputation as a nurse can hinge on one person's perception of you. So,
and on the other hand, healthcare systems are used to nurses coming and going, but to your point, you want to make sure that you leave that everybody, not everybody, but you leave and you have a good feeling about it, and let them with a good feeling about you. That's important.
that's exactly right. So I don't know if we have, it looks like Tracy's done something. We have a lot more viewers. A lot of people are hopping on now. So again, Tracy's asking, if you're just chiming in or you're just tuning in, where are you watching from? Make sure you tell us. And then if you have questions for Barb, if you have a specific question, Barb has been med surge, which I know is what a lot of you are going to go into, but she's had experience all over the U.S., well, not all over the U.S., but all over the nursing field and nursing industry. So make sure to pop your questions in the chat. Barb is here and she has a wealth of knowledge to answer your questions. I'm starting to see a lot of people chime in. We have somebody going, looks like they're going to North Carolina. That is absolutely exciting. Now people are chiming in. Kenya, the Philippines. There's our viewers. There's our people. Yay. Gotta love it when technology works your way. What other, we're approaching the 10 o'clock time though. So what other tips do you have for making it as a nurse in the United States?
Okay, so the United States is a melting pot. We have a lot of different cultures here. We have a lot of different languages. We have a lot of different backgrounds of people. So one thing that you want to do is, when you're looking for a place, there's places in the United States that have, for instance, I'm from Philadelphia. And I knew there were a lot of people that had my background. Either it was Italian or it was, something in my background. So it would be a good idea for you to look for a place that you would be comfortable in. Is it the coast? Is it the Midwest, like Ohio and Indiana and so forth? Is it north? Do you like snow? Because and is it the South, where it's It's hot. So
Extremely.
you want to make sure you're not, you come from a certain climate. So maybe it's a good idea to say, maybe it's the same climate that I came from or close to it. Do I want to move to Maine where it's snowy and cold all the time? Because I came from a different climate. And so you want to make sure you're physically as comfortable as you can be to be successful because you might have a family. You want to make sure your kids are comfortable. And, but then when you're here, then you get a chance to look around. You might get a chance to travel. But hooking up with somebody that is like a preceptor is very important. Once you get into a hospital, you will be assigned a preceptor. So you have to nurse that, excuse the nurse, you have to nurse that relationship because they're going to be very important for you.
Absolutely. I know a lot of times some are just so eager to get over here they don't take into consideration the climate. Especially I know we have a lot of nurses who've never seen snow and never experienced snow. So the thought of like moving somewhere where there's snow, you're excited because you're like, yay, snow. I'm here to tell you, and Barb's here to tell you, snow is fun for the first few days.
Yeah.
After that, it's not fun anymore.
No, it's not fun. And mostly you're very correct in that. And like we get mostly nurses from other countries and their climate is mild.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's why Florida gets a lot of nurses.
Mm-hmm.
When I say a lot, we don't get an overabundance, but we do get our share because our climate is like that climate.
Yes, absolutely. But I know a lot of people are like, I just need to get my foot in the door in a US healthcare system, and I can live with anything for 3 years. And that is very true. That is very true. So if that's you and you're just trying to get your foot in the door and you're like, I can suck it up for 3 years and then I will travel to warmer climates.
Well, the other thing is, this is really, it's important, but it may not be for everybody, is a connection to a church.
Mm-hmm.
That's really important. And a lot of our nurses that came from the Philippines joined our Catholic church, and they're still part of the congregation. And they have a group. Usually, churches will have a group that welcome nurses from other countries and bring them in. And so that's another avenue.
That's a really great plug for, whatever your religious belief is or religious organization. That's something you'll want to, as you're researching where you're going to live, especially if you're coming with a family. We've talked about making sure you research schools and appropriate neighborhoods, but start if religion is something that's extremely important to you in your life and getting plugged in somewhere, that's a great way to get plugged into the community. Is finding whatever your religious background is. Find where you're going to get plugged in. Here's a great question. How long is the orientation of a nurse joining a U.S. team? So if you have someone coming from overseas joining the U.S. team, how long is their orientation process?
Well, it depends. Sometimes it's tailored. It depends on what the background. Were you a nurse? Are you a nurse's aide? Are you in school? What is your background and what specialty? Because if you're a nurse in another country, you know what nursing is. And so we always assign a preceptor to you. And so I would say for a med-surg unit, the orientation is generally 8 to 12 weeks. But that's actually for a new nurse. So you may be just getting oriented to the climate or to the unit that you're assigned to, and it may not be that long. But we always have continuing education. We always have programs. And so that's important.
Very good. So 8 to 12 weeks is about the average
For a
new nurse, for med-surg.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. 8 to 12 weeks. She also asked, you just said, how do you handle the challenges met? Sarah, I'm going to have to ask you to be a little more specific in your question, kind of what specific challenges are you thinking of if you're watching live and you weren't able to tune in earlier, Barb and I were talking about the language and the medical jargon. And I don't know if Tracy, you can put these in the chat, but Barb suggested there's two books, and the internet's a great place to check them out, but it's Taber's, Tabers Medical Dictionary. And there's another one called the Merck Manual, MERCK, Merck Manual. So Tracy, if he's on there, he can pop that information in the chat for you guys to check those out as far as medical. Yep, there he is. Tracy. Look, and he even made it come across. Tracy, you genius over there. He is. He's a gem. He really is. So those are the two books that Barb has suggested for you to check out if you're trying to learn the medical jargon over here in the United States. Sarah's also asked, do preceptors offer counseling?
Okay, so generally, if it's a preceptor in a hospital. Generally, they offer counseling in terms of getting used to your unit, how to handle certain patients, the physical layout of the unit, orienting you to where's the medication room. Many places have unit pharmacists, and who are they, and how do we dispense medication? Because everybody has a different way to dispense medications. But the other thing is, they will orient you to, we have what we call an electronic medical record in most hospitals. And that means we don't do paper charts anymore. So that's an important thing that you will have to learn. And most often you will take classes in that. They offer classes, and your preceptor will teach you how to chart without paper. It's great. And let's see, there was something else I wanted to say about that. Oh, but in terms of personal counseling, not so much. But most hospitals have chaplains, or they have social workers, and they're the ones that can offer you counseling in terms of, how do I adapt to this community? How do I adapt to how do I adapt to the medical staff? Because every doctor is a little bit different. Some have tempers. Most surgeons have tempers. And so you'll get to know that. And we do sit down with the doctors and say, go easy here, folks, because we don't want that nurse to get in distress because of the way you talk. And, that's the way they are. I mean, I'm used to it. But anyway, no, I would say your preceptor in your hospital is mostly there to precept you on how to orient you to the electronic medical record, physical layout and things. But most often they're not preceptors. They're not counselors.
Absolutely. That was a great question too, Sarah. Thank you for asking that so that we could give some clarification there. Sunil asked about how much time it takes for the immigration process after receiving an offer letter. A fast process, Sunil, is like 18 to 24 months. I was just talking about this with Tracy. That's for RNs, not nurse aides. Nurse aides are on a totally different timeline. But yep, see, there he goes. Tracy's already commenting. Usually it can vary between 18 and 24 months. But like I like to say a lot, is every person's journey is different. So it's going to depend on a lot of different variables for you, Sunil. But if you've already gotten your offer letter, you should be practicing for your English exam. So yay, reach out to your case manager so you can start practicing your English. I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat. We have been live for 35 minutes and Barb has been absolutely awesome answering these questions, unless some others pop up last second. But I just want to thank you so much, Barb. This is going to be.
Can I say one more thing?
Oh, please. Yes.
Okay. I want to emphasize that nursing is a great profession. And if that's what you want to do and you have the heart for it, I say go for it, because sometimes nurses, and this is not that often, sometimes nurses go in and they don't realize how difficult it is. It's very emotional. It really takes a lot out, especially, and I'll just say, my very first patient when I was a new graduate was a 14-year-old boy with leukemia. And this was before we had children's hospitals. And unfortunately, he passed away. But his parents couldn't get there, and I sat with him until he passed away. And I think if I would not have had the heart for a nurse, that might have been it for me, because it was really emotional. But you take away a lot from your patients too. They give you a lot, and they take a lot. So it's hard, but it's great.
Absolutely. I know. I mean, I know we have nurses right now. They're all over the world. They're, going through the immigration process. Plus, they have this day-to-day labors of being a nurse that they're still going through. So, we appreciate you guys. We appreciate you all over the world. We do have one question, and Barb took this exam quite a while ago, but she might have some tips on it. Do you have any good tips or books to study for your NCLEX?
I would say any good, let's see, anatomy and physiology book. And you can Google these. And in fact, if you go to NCLEX and study NCLEX and things like that, I'm willing to bet that they have a list of things, that study guides that you can do. But I would say basic anatomy and physiology. Don't worry about like chemistry or anything like that. But I would just say mostly that.
Make sure you're up to date on all of your anatomy and physiology. That's a great tip.
That's a big, and plus you might want to pick up a good psychology book, because sometimes those questions lean toward psychology.
Very good. Very good. Someone else. I love it. Our nurses will hop on here and give each other tips. Saunders is apparently a good book.
Oh, yes, Saunders is really good. Yeah.
There you go. Where are we looking? So Sarah, if you go back, I think you joined the show a little late. If you go back, she was asking about challenges like weather and language, different machine usages, team collaboration. Barb did answer all of those questions already. So you might have to, after we're done being live, kind of go back and watch from the beginning. We talk about snow being pretty for 4 days. And then after that.
Oh, there's a good question.
Do we have another one?
Do we have an option to choose day or night shift during orientation?
Oh, that's a great question.
Well, let me put it this way. Most new nurses, not new, but new to the hospital, don't get to choose their shift. Mm-hmm. You have to either work. And, it's totally, most hospitals do 12-hour shifts now. But they're night shift or day shift. There's no such thing as an evening shift anymore, unless it's in the operating room. But most often, no, you don't have a choice. Unless you choose night shift. Then they're like, yeah, we'll take you, because
nobody wants night shift.
Nobody wants night shift.
That was an excellent question. As far as the dialysis, yes, we are accepting dialysis nurses with at least one current year of dialysis experience. Have you ever had any experience working in a dialysis area, Barb?
No, but my best friend was she was a dialysis nurse, and then she was a organ retrieval kidney. She worked for the Kidney Foundation.
Okay.
I'll tell you that if you think taking care of patients with cancer is bad, taking care of patients on dialysis is worse.
Okay.
Because you have to understand how they never feel quite good. They feel good the day after dialysis, then after that that's a special thing. But yes, there's a big shortage of dialysis nurses right now.
Absolutely. Says, how many nurses in your estimate do you need? Or I think I lost the other one. Do you need, or does the USA need? That's going to be a really big number.
Yeah. I don't know exactly. But the thing is with numbers and nurses, there's a constant fluctuation. You get a bunch of nurses in to work a certain specialty, and then a bunch leave. So it's a floating number.
Mm-hmm.
But I will bet every one of you can find a place here.
Oh, yes, absolutely. For RNs, especially dialysis nurses.
Oh, yeah.
Especially. Someone commented, they said, what was it? They were like, I will be happy to work any shift, which is
Oh, that's
awesome.
good.
I know if everyone could come over with that attitude, I know people come over with families and small children, and it's just not feasible, or it's more difficult to be available for any shift. But I love that attitude. I will work anything. Just let me work.
Well, you know what? One of the things that I noticed about the hospital that I just currently retired from is we have a lot of foreign nurses that worked in OB, in obstetrics. Yes. So if any of you are interested in obstetrics, make sure you let them know that.
Oh, that's very cool. That's very cool. Someone just asked about an eye unit. Is that optometry? Isn't that what that is?
Oh no, we don't have eye units. You don't usually get patients with an issue with. I'll tell you what, because, and I hate to say this, but a lot of patients with eye issues, they're not, they don't qualify for admission. It's usually at-home treatment or with an ophthalmologist. But no, we don't have units specific. I'll tell you one place that might, Will's Eye Hospital in Philadelphia. That's an eye hospital, but I think that they go for specific conditions.
Okay. What is, someone asked about ostomy? I don't know what that is.
Oh, ostomy, yes. Most hospitals have ostomy nurses, okay? They're the ones that take care of when patients have colostomies.
Oh, okay.
But they're teamed with, they usually are patients that are wound care nurses also. Mm-hmm. So they take care of wounds and ostomies. And yes, we have those positions, but generally they're the ones, they're specialized. So you have to be a nurse for a while because you have to go through wound care certification and ostomy certification. It's unless you are one already.
So basically, like from what I'm hearing and what I'm understanding is a lot of you may accept positions as med surg or, basically like good BSN right out of school nursing positions. Like many of you may accept those kinds of positions, but once you get here in the United States, you do have the opportunity to further your education and go for specializations. Is that correct? From what I'm hearing, Barb?
Oh yeah, you can definitely. And hospitals, and this is a good conversation to have with the nurse executive or the nurse manager. Hospitals, if they have any kind of good reputation, they will encourage you to go back to school to get a certification, stoma certification or whatever, or stay on med surg. You can get a certification for there.
When you said stoma, someone just said stoma patients. What is stoma?
That's like a colostomy.
Okay.
Stomas, yeah.
Gotcha. Oh, okay. Okay. That makes sense now. Ostomy, stoma. Yeah. All the root words and all of the things. Awesome.
Tell me which hospital it is that nurses working.
Obstetrics.
Okay. Baptist in Jacksonville.
Yeah, it's going to depend. So, which hospital is it where nurses work in obstetrics? So there's a lot of hospitals that that have nurses that work in obstetrics. Practicing as a midwife. As long as you are Samuels, I think we're still looking. You have to have that RN in order to go through our program and go through our process. You still have to have that BSN.
The midwives usually do have a BSN.
Oh, okay.
They do. Our midwives all did.
But in the U.S., they do. Yeah.
Yeah. Mostly midwives are in practice with obstetricians.
Okay.
They're not employed by the hospital. They're employed by an obstetrician.
Okay.
So that the obstetrician, for instance, one of our doctors here, Dr. McGrath, his wife was a midwife, and she had privileges in OB. So they're not hospital related, but they're doctor office related.
Okay. That's awesome. Yeah. So that's definitely a question, once you get here, let them know, it's just kind of, I talk about this all the time on the show. You have to advocate for yourself. You have to let people know what you're interested in. You have to let people know, hey, I would really like to pursue this. how do I go about doing that? Someone will be able to give you some advice. Like I said, someone will help you. So it's a matter of getting over here, getting your feet wet, getting acclimated to the culture, and then kind of figure out what path you want to take. Dialysis nurses, we need dialysis nurses. 100%. I see dialysis nurses. Yes. If you are a dialysis nurse with 1 year of experience, please apply. Worldwide needs you, wants you. Please come. Do you allow cross training? Like if you're a med-surg nurse and you opt to be assigned in the HD unit?
Okay. What do you mean by HD?
Yeah, that's a question
Is
for
that like the
Ron.
ICU or the emergency room?
I'm Barb, you're going to know more than I am. So
Yeah,
what these abbreviations
I'm
mean?
not familiar with that, with those initials for a unit. Did you mean like the emergency department?
He said
Oh,
hemodialysis.
Okay. Well, it depends because most of the hemodialysis units are standalone. So for instance, we have Fresenius is a standalone hemodialysis unit. Patients go there 3 times a week and get dialyzed. Some of the bigger hospitals have dialysis units.
Okay.
And yes, we do allow cross training, but what we want, if you're new to the hospital, we want you to work in a certain area for a period of time and then request, I'd like to be cross trained to the emergency room. I'd like to get oriented to ICU, intensive care. The only place we don't allow cross training for obvious reasons would be the operating room.
That makes sense.
That's a huge orientation.
How long is an operating room orientation?
Oh my gosh. At least 3 months. Because you have to learn how to keep a patient safe when they're being operated on. You have to learn the procedures. You have to learn how to talk to surgeons when you think they should know something that they're not aware of. It's a very different atmosphere. I was a scrub nurse for the cardiac team. You have to work with certain temperaments also. That's a really hard job.
I would say that would be like mentally tough.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Mentally tough. All right. So we have been live 48 minutes. Holy smokes. We have taken a lot of Barb's morning. I'm sure we have urology and gastro wards.
They are usually mixed in with the med-surg units. So the patients that come in with gastric distress or urological issues generally are medical surg, unless they're very critically ill, then they're on the ICU.
Yeah. I know what NICU is. NICU. Yes, we do have NICU nurses.
Yeah.
We do have a whole NICU.
Yeah.
Yes, its own little baby to, say. Yes, absolutely. NICU nurses. Well, all right. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you to Barb. I sincerely appreciate you. All of our nurses obviously appreciate you taking the time to answer questions. There's an operating room nurse right there. So I'm sure, Barb, she can.
There you go. Yep. Great.
Yep.
Well, thank you, everybody. And I want to say best of luck. And maybe someday we'll meet.
Absolutely. Barb's in Florida, and she is well connected with her Florida hospital system in her area. And like she said, she was in Philadelphia. So if you guys have questions for Barb specifically, please email me. Tracy can pop my email on here. I am happy to relay those messages to Barb, and she would love to answer your questions and to hear back from you. Any questions. So I'm going to say goodbye to Barb.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to say thank you so much to everyone who is out there watching, who is out there just being a part of Worldwide. If you're trying to become a part of Worldwide, if you filed an application and you're an RN specifically, like I said, nurse aides, that timeline right now is really, really tough. But for RNs, yes, absolutely. Tracy, if you can pop my email in there so they can keep asking questions. But next week, you can get a double dose of Kari. Bless your hearts. I am available. Of course, we have Kari's Corner, but on Wednesday, I am doing a webinar. Yay! This is not a webinar. I know people get confused and they're like, I watched your webinar. I'm like, no, you watched Kari's Corner. I will be doing an official webinar, and I'm going to break down each of the English language exams that are offered and that are accepted by CGFNS. And I'm going to talk about choosing the exam that's right for you. Especially now that we have so many options through CGFNS. I get a lot of emails. I'm thinking about taking the IELTS or the PTE. Which one should I take? Tune in next week on Wednesday. Register for that webinar. I'll be answering questions just like I do on here. But I am super excited about that webinar. And then guess what? I'll be live again from my corner. Tracy's going to have to remind me what my show is next week, because he always has to remind me, like, what am I talking about this week, Tracy? But I also have one more super fun, super exciting announcement is I get to join Ron Hoppy on his world tour. So I will be coming to South Korea, and I will be coming to the Philippines, and I'm so excited. So stay tuned. In September, we will be having Kari's Corner live from the Philippines. I'm so excited. Checking out I'm just so thrilled to be a part of Worldwide. I'm so excited to see a part of the world that I've never seen in South Korea and the Philippines. So thank you so much for tuning in. And again, shoot me those questions if you have any questions for Barb or for me. You're always welcome to email me. And I guess that's going to wrap it up. So as a friendly reminder to not face the corner, but to face the world with Worldwide. Hope everyone has a great weekend.